Back in 2002, when I started working on TREP animation, there wasn't as many animation software out there for 2D like there is today. And I was trying to remember what software I had chosen back then to work on TREP. And I tried looking at my files, and I couldn't figure it out because they're so old. So I did some digging, and I found the software that I was using way back then. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, on today's episode of the Expat Animator. So I opened up my old hard drive where I store my TREP files, and I just wanted to see some of the old files to see if I could figure out what software I was using because I couldn't remember. And so if I just open up any of these files, you can see here the date on this JPEG is from 2002. Here's another one from 2003. So I had worked on TREP from 2002 until 2004. And if I just search for something like this, here's a file with no extension from 2003. And I believe that this is one of the animation software files that I am trying to open. And if I try to open it, obviously it doesn't know what the file is. There's no extension. If I do an get info, there's no real information I can get out of this file. So I did some digging and I found an old journal entry that I had written that used the term Animation Stand Pro. So I Googled that, and I Googled Animation Stand Pro software, and the first thing that comes up is this kdanmobile.com for Animation Desk. So if I open this up, what it gives me is this app that's for iOS, Android, and Windows called Animation Desk. Not Animation Stand Pro, but I'm thinking that this is what Animation Stand Pro that I used to use on the Mac has turned into over the years. I'm not totally sure about that. If you know more, go ahead and leave it in the comments. But I couldn't find any actual screenshots of Animation Stand Pro. I think the software was just too old. But I believe that this is what it's turned into. It's a 2D animation software. I haven't used this version of it, but I might look into that someday. The other thing that I remembered was using Digicel's Flipbook. And if you're familiar with that, right now it used to be $800 for the Pro version, and now you can get it for $100. And there's different lower end versions of it. But if you're gonna use this software, you probably want the Pro version because you want to be working at least 920 by 1080 dimensions. So I had used Digicel Flipbook for certain things, but I didn't use it for TREP. Like I said, I used Animation Stand Pro. But this was a software that I did use for certain projects, going back even further. Thinking back on working on TREP all these years ago, I remembered that I didn't even know what size to build my files at when I originally started in 2002. I knew that I wanted something with a better resolution than what I was animating at, but there wasn't really even any information on the internet on high def. Nobody knew what 1080p was back then. Everything was still back on the old TV resolutions. And even though we were editing in Final Cut Pro, I don't believe that there was 1080p as an option back then. So what did I do to solve this? Well, at the time, I had bought an Apple PowerBook G4 550 here, and here's the specs on everymac.com. And if you look at the screen resolution here, it was 1152 by 768, and that was the resolution of this big 15-inch screen that it had. And so I had tried to basically make my animations as big as I possibly could, which was the max of the screen because I wasn't using an external monitor. So just remember this number here, 1152, because I found when I opened up some of my old TREP files, this is a 720p version, which is 1280 by 720, that I upscaled from my original files. But here's the original file. And you can see that it's actually smaller than 720p. And if I do an info on this, look at the current size. It's 1154 by 634. So how did I come up with this resolution? Because this is what I was building my animations at. And I just knew that I needed to build as big as I could. Well, look at this 1154. That's basically this 1152 of my monitor. So I remember specifically just picking this resolution size based off of my laptop. And, you know, it turns out it wasn't even 720p, but even back in 2002, I don't think 720p really existed. And there definitely wasn't any cameras shooting 720p back then either. So anyway, just a little trip down memory lane for me to remember trying to build this animation by myself and not really knowing what I was doing. And it's kind of crazy thinking back on the 20 years since then almost, that how things have changed and technologies have changed. And it's actually surprising to me that there was software that could animate back then and get the look that I was looking for with my 2D hand-drawn animations. And again, I was drawing these on paper with a light table and scanning them in. And I actually found a journal that I had written about the whole process, and I'm thinking of making a video on that. So let me know in the comments if you want to see that. It might be more interesting to me than anyone else, but I thought it was interesting because it was my thoughts in my work process at the time, you know, almost 20 years ago, making this 2D animation. So that's it for today's video. Thanks for joining me. My name is Patrick Davidson, the Expat Animator, and I hope to see you next time.